am Petula Pinto, Executive Director for the TiE Ottawa chapter, my second hat. On behalf of Bharat Radra, our chair, Jaswinder Obi, or as we can call him, Obi-Wan Kenobi, our president, and the entire TiE Ottawa team, we truly appreciate you making this event a great success. Thank you. We have an excellent evening lined up for you, and it is my pleasure to introduce our MC duo, returning by popular demand, Haruka Kumararatne and Manu Sharma. Haruka is a manager at KPMG and a long-standing TiE Ottawa supporter. He is an active member within the Ottawa entrepreneurial community and currently leads Product Hunt Ottawa. Haruka is also a member of the World Economic Forum's Global Shapers community in Ottawa. And last but not least, he has amazing hair. Worthy of some envy. Manu Sharma is a good friend who has called Ottawa home for the past 14 years. He is a past recipient of Ottawa's 40 Under 40 Awards and a recipient of the city's Immigrant Entrepreneur Awards, just to name a few of his accomplishments. He is currently the Executive Director of CSED, Center for Social Enterprise Development, and will sure lead the team to new heights. However, unlike Haruka, I cannot say the same about Manu's hair. But I am glad he visited the monastery. You can ask him the story. And now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming our MCs for the night, Haruka Kumararatne and Manu Sharma.
So you know what's funny about this is I asked my entrepreneurial friends, should I cut my hair? All of them are like, oh no, it's great, keep it. Then I ask all my kind of corporate friends, like, your hair is way too long, you should have cut it 6 months ago. So I'm getting validation that I'm just gonna keep my hair as it is. But I hope everyone had a fantastic TiECon Canada. I hope everyone got a chance to get to know each other. I hope by now we're all best friends. Yes? Yeah? That's great to hear. But you know, TiECon's been great this year. We've had a chance to see the impacts of all these emerging technologies on a broader scale on our day-to-day lives in the future. And then through the panel sessions, we've gone a bit more into the details of how these technologies are going to impact our lives. And we've also got a chance to hear from some amazing Canadian success stories and entrepreneurs. So I just want to give another huge round of applause to all the speakers who've come out here and made TiECon 2017 amazing. And who knows, maybe one of your talks is a catalyst for one of you out there, or maybe a couple of you, to take action and take advantage of these amazing business opportunities that are coming through these new emerging technologies and new markets. So maybe we'll find out in a couple of years at a pitch fest in 5 years or so. Who knows? But at this time, I would like to bring up a dear friend, Joshua Smith, who is a charter member. He works at Welsh LLP, and he's part of our core team of TiECon Canada 2017 to formally introduce Manu Sharma.
I get multiple introductions.
Thanks, Haruka. So everything Petula said, plus a true friend, a true giver to the community, a true supporter of the youth community. Manu Sharma.
Good evening, everybody. It's such a privilege, and I had a little bit written to bring my guest over. I have the privilege of hosting the Fireside chat today. I'll get into the reasons of why I was chosen, or if I was even given a choice. But I want to take 2 minutes before I bring Cheryl over just to, again, talk about TiE Ottawa in particular. Because in the conference, that's not an opportune time for us to talk about why this is such an important organization for folks like I, and why we keep doing this year after year after year. Heruka and I are back. We'll continue to keep coming back till we can give our time. I came here 14 years ago as an international student. Bharat is here, Deepak is here, Anand is here, Kalai is somewhere, I see Vineet. These are all charter members. They took us under their fold. It had nothing to do with I came from India with an accent on a ship that's still in Ottawa River. It had to do with the philosophy of the organization. It had to do with the commitment of the organization and the time and effort that they invested in us during our formative years gave us the confidence to even come to these stages to share our stories with you. So I would like to call everybody to give a big round of applause to TiE Ottawa, the spirit of TiE Ottawa, and the spirit of TiE Global, because innumerable lives have been transformed by these organizations. So please join me in giving a round of applause to TiE. Which brings us to the principal business of the night. I have the privilege of sitting down with Sheryl Wudunn, who is our Fireside keynote for tonight. And I think I was given this opportunity because I think there's a lot of more deserving people who could sit down with Cheryl and do more justice to this conversation. But I think I was given this opportunity again in the spirit of what the organization stands for. Bharat and team recognize the fact that I'm going through a transformation in my life right now, where I just came back from a 1-year sabbatical in the company of a beautiful girl I brought back to Ottawa. But you know, I was a technology entrepreneur for over 10 years, and I finally had to do something different. But community activism, community engagement, involvement were all a part of my life on the side. And in this 1 year, I realized that it was time for me to do that at the core and maybe do technical entrepreneurship on the side for a bit. So I joined CSED, which is the Center for Social Enterprise Development. And I have 1 of 4 books that Cheryl has written. And my dad used to say that the only way to become immortal in this world is to put a book in the library. And then he would say, well, even better if somebody reads that book. And I got this book 2 days ago, and jet lagged, really jet lagged, but I've not been able to put this down because so much of it I can identify with from all the travels I took and from everything that I want to achieve. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Cheryl onto the stage, and we're going to have 25 minutes with her. I'm going to try to give her as much time as possible because she has so much to share with us. So please join me in welcoming Cheryl to the stage.
It's not working. Yeah, it's working. Well, thank you very much. I'm honored to be here.
This is my first time doing a fireside. I actually called it something different. The first time I was referring at home, I said, I'm in a fire something, and I forgot it was called a fireside. So bear with me. This is my first time, but we're gonna have a really good conversation here today.
So you know, in the fireside chats, the host is supposed to do most of the speaking.
I don't know. We're going to change the rules tonight. New paradigm, new paradigm. So the way we're going to do this is I'm going to take just a few minutes to introduce Cheryl very quickly, then turn it over to her. This is one of those opportunities where we have somebody who touches so many themes themes that are emerging, themes that the whole world is looking at. So we're going to try to get as many in as 25 minutes. So Cheryl is from New York City, third generation Chinese American, graduate of Cornell, HBS, Princeton. My dad would have willed me everything if I went to one of those schools. Senior banker, business executive, lecturer, writer, journalist, spent time with the New York Times in their Beijing and Tokyo bureau, won a Pulitzer Prize in 1990 together with her husband, writes on and is involved with growth companies, technology, new media, alternative energy, and emerging markets, and I can read on and on and on. But I think at this point of time, let's just jump into the first thing. China. You spent a lot of time in China with New York Times. They just had their 19th Party Congress, where Premier Xi announced that he will be spearheading a great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. Also made two other statements. Asked the Chinese military to fight and win wars, asked them to be ready for it, and vowed that he will eradicate poverty in China by 2020. Like, kind of statements that drive fear in the North American hearts. Why don't we start with that?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for being here. Happy birthday, TiECon Ottawa, and happy birthday, Canada. So I'm really delighted to be here. Thank you. So when it comes to important topics and big topics, China certainly is one of those large topics. And that question you framed, Manu, is very interesting because Xi Jinping, as many of you know, is the Communist Party leader in China, also the president of China, also the president of the Military Commission in China. He has consolidated power like almost no leader. So some of you also know that Xi Jinping was written into the Constitution of China at this Party Congress. And while, of course, Mao was written into the Constitution and Deng Xiaoping was written into the Constitution, let me put this into context for you. Mao Zedong, who basically led the revolution that created the founding of the PRC, the People's Republic of China, he was written into the Constitution 24 years after having been in power. Deng Xiaoping, who basically broke open the doors of China to allow the market to come into China and create this gigantic economic revolution that we now know is China, he was written into the Constitution after he died. Xi Jinping was written into the Constitution. Xi Jinping thought is written into the Constitution 5 years after being in power. So which man do you think has the most power in history of the PRC? We will see. He also did not name a successor. A successor was not named, which is unusual because at the beginning of a second term, usually there was someone who was the successor in waiting and no one was named. So that leaves open the possibility that maybe he will continue for a third term, maybe a fourth term, a fifth term. Counterbalancing that is the idea, or is the reality, that there were rumors before the Party Congress that he was going to be named Chairman Xi Jinping. The only other leader that has the name Chairman before him is Mao Zedong, Chairman Mao. He did not get that title. So there are some forces, but basically people, I was speaking to a Chinese who has access to top levels of the leadership, and this person was saying the other day that there is no opposition to Xi Jinping. So we have a man who has consolidated enormous amount of power in the fastest growing economy. It is still the fastest growing economy. Well, I think India is growing faster now, 8%, 7%. But over the past few decades, it's enormously fast growth, and also increasing power around the world, perception of power around the world. And that's very important for for North America, for the US in particular, because as you all know, the Trump administration is pulling back in terms of its profile in world leadership, and China is tentatively trying to step into that. And what's remarkable is that in the past 10, 11 months that we've had of the Trump presidency, it is remarkable how perceptions on surveys, they've surveyed people's views about China's power and the US power around the world. The perception of China's economic might versus the US and China's political might versus the US China has gained stature, the US has lost stature. China has gained 10 percentage points in some cases in terms of the perception of its increasing power. So that's an incredible shift because China has been stable over the years and has never really been that much of a force. So when you ask the question about Xi Jinping's statement about war, that is a frightening prospect because they are really intent on building up the military, the Chinese military. As to poverty, I am not so sure how much intent to fulfill they have on that front. I mean, I don't, they obviously have a scorecard, but I don't know how many people are really going to be measuring Xi Jinping on whether he meets that goal of no poverty. But China, admittedly, because of economic growth, has been the main driver. China and India have been the main drivers behind the world achieving the Millennium Goals that just were reached in 2016. Hundreds of millions of people lifted out of poverty, mainly because of the growth in China and India. So maybe he will meet his goals.
As businessmen, what are the imperatives? Like, other than China escaping the tag of just being the cheap source of product, like, where is China headed, strategically speaking?
Well, China has, there are two main strategic things that I'd like to raise today. One is the North Korea, that we'll actually talk about a little bit later. But to your question about the strategic, business imperative, Xi Jinping himself, in 2013, basically launched the One Belt, One Silk Road project. It is a giant project. It's larger than they've ever done before. I mean, they anticipate somewhere like $5 trillion the entire vision will actually embody over the years. And they want to transform Asia and the world. There are 60 countries, nearly 60, 70 countries that have signed on for some aspect of the One Belt, One Road, and it's mainly an infrastructure play. I mean, the way China built its economy was first start with building up the infrastructure. So that's what they want to do now with the rest of the region and possibly many other parts of the world. And so they want to start roads, bridges, tunnels, ports. All these infrastructure projects that they think will be the foundation for building much larger economies that China will be the center of. So this is an incredible and very ambitious goal that I think the U.S. should be a little bit concerned about. I mean, the U.S. has actually signed on. It's one of those 60, 70 countries, believe it or not. But it's a tiny role. China's doling out money. I mean, they have strings attached, of course, but already they've built the port in Pakistan, sinking $46 billion in that. Who knows whether that will pay itself off, but, Pakistan is really, obviously helping, is really a key facet of that. And so the question for India is, how is it going to play its card? Because so far it's been hesitant to jump in, but at some point is it going to say, well, we don't want to be left behind, right? We want to be in the center of this economic activity. Obviously, India has an incredible economic engine on its own, but it will be interesting to see how the dynamics, because there's so much politics involved as well, and it's how this will play out. So there is an enormous opportunity for business people of in all facets in the entire region of Asia and these programs are stretching to Europe and Middle East and Africa as well.
I know you said you don't like talking about you, but I'm very interested in your story coming out. For everybody here to find out, how did a reporter representing New York Times in the Beijing and Tokyo Bureau get into writing a book on violence against women? So with that context of China established and your love for understanding that part of the world established, walk us through the story. What happened? Like, how did you go from writing 2 books on China with your husband to writing 2 books on social change, social justice, and women empowerment?
Right. Well, thank you for asking that. That's actually a very interesting story. So Half the Sky is about the challenges that women face around the world. And there are some real social challenges, moral challenges that women face around the world. And A Path Appears is also about that, but more with a domestic focus. But the seeds of both of those books were really sown basically in China. When we were living in China, we covered the Tiananmen Square democracy movement, and it was front page news for weeks, months on end for the New York Times. The year after that, after the military crackdown, we started traveling to the countryside because we wanted to find out what is it that the countryside, people living in the rural areas, what have they heard about what went on in the cities? Did they hear about the protests? Did they hear about the killings and the crackdown? So we found that they did hear about something. They didn't really know much, but we found something even more, shocking, which is that there were we had done some research, and we discovered that there were 30 million missing females from the Chinese population, cumulative over the years. 30 million. Now, that's a large number no matter what country you're in. I know China has 1 billion plus people at the time. Still, that was a large number, 30 million. We just couldn't get our head around 30 million missing females. Where did they go? What happened to them? Well, it turns out that a lot of them probably were not registered because the Chinese government requires that you register all of your children because they have a one-child policy. You're not supposed to have more than one child, right? And if you have a girl, you're like, oh my gosh, I just used up my allotment, I can't have a boy. So they would not register the girl and hope to try again and then get a boy. The other was that they had brought the sonogram into China, so that meant that when the mother was still pregnant, she could say, oh, this is a boy, I'll keep it. Oh, this is a girl, well, no, I won't, I'll abort it. The other, obviously, was that there was some infanticide. There was some, the girl was born and the midwife took the baby and it was never seen again. There's a bucket of water and the baby was never seen again. So that really, really horrified us. But we thought that was just China. China's this vast country full of good and evil, but that was the evil side. So we didn't think too much of it. We thought, well, that's China. Then we moved to Japan, and we covered the region, South Korea, Japan, also Southeast Asia to some degree. And we also discovered that there was great discrimination against women. So after China, we had written China Wakes, a book about China, and I wrote a chapter on women in China. And after we left Japan, we wrote a book about Asia, Japan and Asia, and I wrote a chapter about women in Asia. Again, thinking, this is just Asia, their culture is very strong. There's a strong preference for sons, for boys in many of the countries within Asia, but that's Asia. Came back to the US. My husband became a columnist for the New York Times. He started traveling throughout Africa and realized that there were similar discrimination in Africa as well. So we started piecing together that there was a global phenomenon, and that became Half the Sky and A Path Appears.
So I watched a part of the documentary on I Wanted Half the Sky. How did you get like a plethora of celebrities first in the production of the documentary? Like both of her books were made into very successful documentaries. But just the number of people that you had stand up and come on camera and make a case for it, it's almost you started a movement. out of the United States. How did you manage to do that?
We were very lucky because there were a lot of celebrities, Olivia Wilde, Meg Ryan, America Ferrera, Gabrielle Union, who were really interested in this issue, and they cared a lot about it for various reasons, and so they all signed up to join us. And I mean, Diane Lane, I mean, all of them. I hope I'm not, I'm probably forgetting one or two, but they donated their time, which was amazing. They just really wanted to spotlight this issue. We had George Clooney actually also giving an introduction to it. I think they realized that one of the things that they can do is shine a light on this very horrific, hard to discuss issue, which is the challenges, the violence against women that is pervasive in many countries, not only in the developing world, but that's also here in the US. And so that was not such a hard, that wasn't the hard part. I mean, we also then realized that not everybody reads books, so that's why we did the documentary. Not everybody looks at documentaries, that's why we did the Facebook game. We actually did a Facebook game on this. We also did mobile games. So we were looking at trying to be platform agnostic and trying to reach people where they most likely like to be reached. Because we didn't want to preach to the choir. We wanted to preach to people who had never heard about this issue before. And there were a confluence of events and confluence of trends going on at the time, so that I think in the civilian world, in the government world, and in the corporate world, you had people really focusing on how do we better empower women, how do we better educate women. And so I think it's become much more standard that this is an important topic.
I do want to open the floor for folks to ask questions of somebody who can touch all these themes in one sit. But let's get to North Korea and talk about Trump. You mentioned something to me when we were very quickly talking outside that Premier Xi almost does not have respect for Trump.
Yeah, so some of the people, I was talking to someone, you know, a Chinese who has actually talked to Xi Jinping and seen how he has discussed Trump. And there is, it's hard to describe, there's kind of a sense of pride that, you know, China is a really strong country now, and they have a leader in the US who is not as intelligent as many of the Chinese leadership. You know, the Chinese, they have all sorts of degrees, right? They've got all sorts of degrees. And yes, you know, Trump has a degree from Wharton Business School, or you know, from University of Pennsylvania, an excellent school, but he just doesn't give off the same kind of aura of intelligence. But I think what's more important is that China sees an opportunity to really slip in now and to take more influence away from the US in many areas, particularly in the military too. I mean, they're very intent on building up their military. So that puts the US in a very awkward position on what it does with North Korea. I visited North Korea a long time ago when it was under Kim Il-sung, and that place is like no place I've ever seen before. It's, you know, I guess the one way it is so controlled, the one way to describe it is that when I was leaving North Korea, and because when we were there, we had a minder, someone was taking us everywhere, and when we would try and grab someone on the street to interview them, we once grabbed 2 girls and asked them about what they thought of America. They replied in unison with the exact same words. So clearly, they had memorized what to say when you see a foreigner. I mean, just random people on the street, because the entire city had been trained to do that. So I thought, well, I need to see a glimpse of the real North Korea. So I thought I would take the train back from Pyongyang to Beijing. Then, at least I could peer along the tracks. I could see, you know, what the people live like, right? How do they live? What do their houses look like? So I got onto the train. It was like, you know, 12-hour train ride. Got onto the train, and we're going along. North Korea had built a wall the entire length of the train, so you could not see a single thing beyond the train windows. It was just amazing, the amount of paranoia and control they have. So what does one do? The Trump administration wants to use China, wants to get China to basically solve the North Korea problem. They want China to cut off all trade. 95% of trade with North Korea goes through China. They want China to put in a complete embargo on all of the oil going into North Korea, because that's where North Korea gets its oil. That's just not going to work. First of all, China's not signing up for that. But also, even if they try to impose a 100% embargo, it would be hard to implement, because you still have fishing boats that would see the opportunity to bring in barrels of oil, and it's very hard. They have a long border. It's very hard to police that. But second of all, of course, logically, China does not want to see North Korea with nuclear weapons. It's frightful to them. They're a neighbor. But China also doesn't want to see North Korea collapse. So that's why if they, don't get their oil, if the economy collapses, they don't want, millions of North Koreans, flooding into China. That to them is also a nightmare. But now both countries, the U.S. and China, are in a precarious position, because how do you solve the problem of North Korea? Already, the military on each side is planning all sorts of contingencies. And one of the issues in conflict that comes up from this is that the U.S. Navy SEALs are trying to plan what happens if, if there is a collapse. They feel that someone needs to go into North Korea and secure the nuclear weapons, so they don't get into rogue hands, that there isn't a crazy general that gets the controls. So they have contingency plans for getting the Navy SEALs into North Korea to secure the nuclear weapons. Well, China has the same thing. Their version of the Chinese Navy SEALs are also planning to try and get into North Korea to secure the nuclear weapons. And there's no coordination between the two sides, because this is all secret. So you've got all these potential points for conflict and flashpoints that it's very difficult to, and this is just one aspect of it. So I do think that China also doesn't have as much influence as the Trump administration believes it does. China sent has an envoy. They appointed an envoy to North Korea to go negotiate with the North Koreans. The North Koreans have not issued that Chinese official a visa yet. So how much influence does China really have? So that's a scary prospect. And I think that most Americans and Canadians and people actually in the public, they have much of less of an appreciation of the prospect for war than the specialists do. I think that you talk to specialists on North Korea, they put the prospects for war at a much higher percentage. Let's say it's 25%. I've heard numbers higher, and the stock market certainly is not accounting for that in the marketplace. And most of us, ordinary people, we certainly don't see it. We're not as worried either. But it could be devastating. The war games show that day one, if there is a nuclear attack, day one, 1 million people would die in South Korea. And another estimate says 2 million would die in the first few days, mostly in South Korea and Japan as well.
Cheryl, 25 minutes is not enough by any stretch. I do want to open the stage for a couple of questions. We do have to serve dinner. I don't want to keep you away from dinner. The focus of these firesides is just to give you a perspective on. There's no way we can capture the depth of who we have on the stage here. But to give the audience a little bit of a perspective on how powerful the thought behind the multifaceted aspect of everything that Cheryl brings to the stage. Like, I read this out loud to you, and I'm gonna read it out to the audience. The book says, you argue that just as slavery and totalitarianism were the greatest moral issues of the 19th and 20th century, crimes against women will be the great moral issue of the 21st century. when I read this, like I couldn't sleep that night. Like there's just so much depth in this one statement. Yeah. So what I could talk with Cheryl till the sun comes up in 2020. So I do want to open the stage for anybody who wants to ask a question. I will then conclude with a statement that again goes to, but I don't know if it is logical to ask questions in a group like this, in a setting like this. But if somebody has a question for somebody who covers the breadth of news, business, social change, tech, politics, this is the time to speak up. Otherwise, hold your breath forever.
So Cheryl, this thing on? First of all, thank you very much for coming from all the way from New York to Ottawa and being present here. And your comments on social issues, political matters is very helpful and very thoughtful. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
But we're all entrepreneurs here, businessmen, opportunists. What message do you have from all your experience and your knowledge in Asia, in the different things that you've done and all that? What's the message? What would you like to impart amongst all the other things that you've done through your books?
Thank you for that question. So basically, I think that you are a room full of incredibly talented and successful people. And so, you know far more than I do on how to build businesses and how to be successful at them. So the one thing that I would just ask is that, and I know many of you do this already, is on the side to cultivate a sense of giving back. And rather than waiting until you're retired, and some of you may want to do it full time when you're retired, but just cultivate. I know you do here it with TiECon already, but to cultivate a little sense of giving back to the society so that you can help bring about change. And we used to think that social change was brought about people who were aid workers. They would go off to the refugee camps. But you know what? Social change is brought about by people from all walks of life, because it takes a village. It takes people from the computer science industry, for accountants, lawyers, web designers, marketing specialists. It takes people from all walks of life to bring about change and to get the message out and to push for social change. So that's what I would ask, is just along the way, is just donate a little bit of your time. Do it with some friends, get together, find a topic or an issue that you all care about and would like to discuss, and then together maybe find an organization that you can work through, or go visit a project so you can learn more about some of these issues. You'll find that not only will you be helping and become an agent for change, you also will find that it is very gratifying. It's very satisfying to you too, because there's a lot of neuroscience behind giving back.
Thank you, Manu. And thank you, Cheryl, for a very entertaining, informative session. I'm just wondering, what do Americans think, or do they think, the businesses? Do they ever look up north and say, hey, we should go to Canada, we should invest in Canada, we should start businesses there? No, there's no laughing matter. I mean, I'd like to know, because Canadians go to San Francisco. They know where to get the money from.
Can you speak a little louder?
Sorry. Yeah, so they know where the money is in the States. Where's Company X going from Canada? Well, they're going to San Francisco. They're going to Boston. They're going to New York. They're going to, Minnesota. So the question is, what do Americans? Do the Americans ever talk about Canada? Do they ever talk about moving to Ontario? So your perspective on that. And how can we change that if that's not the case?
You probably have to ask the consular section of the Canadian Embassy to see whether there's a flood of applications for visas to come to Canada from the US. I bet there are. I bet there are. I think there's a lot of fear right now in the US. I mean, the society, the country is so divided, And there's just an animosity between two parties, which is ridiculous. But there's a sense of, it's not like, wait, let's focus on outcomes to see how we can improve society. It's more, let's see who can win. This is a game about winning. And unfortunately, when it comes to politics and winning, there also will be, it could be that the society loses. So I do think we're at a precarious time also because some of the, there's been a lot of retrogression, which, pullback in policies, which some people argue is great. Deregulation in some ways can be very, very productive. It can be very, very helpful. But it's not as though, look, corporate profits are at record levels. Stock market is at record levels. It's not as though the corporations have been stymied given the regulation that they have already. They just don't want to have to go through all of the burdensome regulations, which I understand. Some of those regulations still are actually quite useful. And so, particularly when it comes to the environment, we don't want to undo just decades of really trying to preserve the earth that we live in. I mean, we all realize now, and I'm interested to see this new environmental report that was released by the Trump administration that says that climate change is, in large part man-made, which is counter to what some of the politicians say. It'd be interesting to see what it really says because we're seeing rollbacks in many facets of American society that if they become permanent, they really could be setbacks. So I think that part of what you're also seeing, which is good, but it's not clear if it's going to be enough, is that just as I said that it would be nice for business people to spend a little time also giving back. There's also people now, everyday people are thinking about how do I, join politics? How do I have to take control of, my own country. We need to take control of our country. We can't just sit there and say, let the politicians decide, because they're not doing as efficient a job as we hope. So, more and more people are actually considering going into politics, which is something we haven't seen before in a long time. So I think that's very interesting.
Cheryl, we're going to have to take your leave. I have to get everybody to dinner. But as you all join me in thanking Cheryl with a huge applause.
Thank you very much.
I would like to end with another of Cheryl's quotes from her book. It is by Wudunn. Hope is like a path in the countryside. Originally, there is nothing. But as people walk this way again and again, a path appears. And I think on that note, we'll take leave of you, Cheryl.
Thank you so much to Manu. That was not bad for your first Fireside chat. Cheryl, thank you so much for incredibly thought-provoking and insightful take on China. Definitely opened up our perspectives. Now I have the great pleasure of introducing a very good friend and mentor. Quite honestly, he's someone who doesn't need an introduction in this room, but I would like to say he is the person in TiE Ottawa who works tirelessly to make this whole conference happen, and he's been doing it since its inception 5 years ago. So please help me in welcoming TiE Ottawa's co-chair, TiE Ottawa Canada's co-chair, as well as the chair of the board for TiE Ottawa, Mr. Bharat Rudra.
So I really, this is the last part before the dinner. So I'm between you and dinner. I know you're very hungry. But what I'm going to talk about is quite important, actually. I think quite important to me, quite important to TiE Ottawa, and as a whole, as a community as a whole in Ottawa. So, we've been talking about all these celebrations that that 5 celebration that we're having. There's about 100 plus people in the audience who weren't here for the day. They just came for gala. So I'll repeat them again one more time. So it's Canada's 150th, Ontario 150. It's the 25th anniversary of TiE Global as a global organization, 15th anniversary for our chapter, and it's the 5th anniversary for TiECon. We did a couple of programs yesterday, and so we decided at TiE that how best can we celebrate this? So we had 3 particular activities / programs in mind, saying this is what we're going to do. The first one, most of you have seen yesterday, it was recognizing the unsung heroes of any community, for our community, of course, as well. So we recorded 100 entrepreneurs. Now, this is not that, we're not saying entrepreneurs are not recognized. Some get recognized, but there's hundreds and thousands of them who do equally good work at their level, contribute to the economy, but they don't get recognized. So that's why we covered 100 entrepreneurs yesterday, and this was a project in collaboration with MDK Business Law Services. Naomi Morisawa, who's a charter member, contributed to this. So second thing came up was that saying, this is great, TiECon has this channel of bringing outside expertise, inspirational speakers, experts to Ottawa and open that window to the world. But what about in Canada, what we do in Canada? We're shy in Canada. We don't do much of this. So we took this project saying, let's highlight what Canada had to offer to the world. So we did a project in collaboration with CIPO, Canadian Intellectual Property Office. So this was the quiz we had this afternoon, and you saw this display going on and talking about what Canada had to offer to the world, innovators and inventions from Canada. And the final piece of this celebration is actually, this is quite a long time in the making. It was supposed to happen last year, but we figured that this is probably a better year to do it. It's another category of unsung heroes. So entrepreneurs start companies, they start their businesses. Those who are successful, they immediately get rewarded by getting some financial returns back. Obviously, that's the purpose of business, to bring back returns to their stakeholders or shareholders. And some of them, they do very well. They create a lot of jobs, they create a lot of wealth in the economy, and they get awarded. But there's one category of people, these are also unsung heroes, that they're behind the scene, and they are actually probably doing as much or even more than the entrepreneurs themselves who are nurturing these entrepreneurs. And we never think about them. Keeping the philosophy of TiE, fostering entrepreneurship and creating wealth. So at TiE, it was thought that we need to bring these people out and recognize them. What have they done for the community? What have they done for the entrepreneurship in the community? So keeping that in mind, TiE Ottawa is launching an award for the contribution to the entrepreneurship in Ottawa. Over the last couple of months, TiE Ottawa formed a committee. We went through a nomination process, and this is not just open to TiE. Of course, it's open to TiE Ottawa members and charter members, but it's also beyond that, it's the whole community. So the committee was formed, and we selected 3 recipients for 2017. With that, I would like to invite 3 committee members, myself as one of them, Jazz Obi, president of TiE Ottawa, and Naomi Morisawa Dikovan, she's a TiE Ottawa charter member, and of course also sponsor. Naomi. And we're going to be starting with the first award, and I will let Naomi go from there.
Okay, so There's a person in this room who is a catalyst, a connector, and a community capacity builder. And I would think that when I mention the name of this person, Coralie Lalonde, that a vast proportion of the people in this room have been touched by Coralie's efforts and engagement and time and the resources at some point in their time. I met Coralie over 10 years ago, and I'm constantly amazed by the energy that she has and her capacity for giving back to this community. She has demonstrated time and time again that her passion about supporting this generation as well as the next generation of entrepreneurs and business leaders. I think some of you will probably remember Tech Venture Challenge. She co-founded that with Luc Lalonde. She has been a co-founder, board member, former chair, organizer, and she drove that, and it was a wonderful celebration for sparking entrepreneurial spirit among post-secondary students in Ottawa and Eastern Ontario. She has encouraged young entrepreneurs. She's been part of Junior Achievement of Ottawa Carleton, Shad Valley, the Entrepreneurship Center, Oakry, the Carleton Biz Camp, Lemonade Stand, Competition Lead to Win, Carleton University. It just goes on and on and on. There's a whole list. She co-founded Engage, which was a program to encourage business leaders to become more engaged in their community. And, you know, for a person like that, and she is a person who not only gives to entrepreneurs, she gives to the community, the social services sector, and animal welfare. I mean, she's the person who is the whole package, and I'm very delighted to be able to present the award to Coralie Lalonde today. So please, Coralie, put your hands together. Thank you. Well deserved.
Thank you. It's an honor to receive a reward for something that requires no recognition because, frankly, I have a lot of fun spending time with entrepreneurs. They have this electric energy and passion about them, and spending time with them allows me the opportunity to suck up that energy and passion without having to do a lot of hard work like they're doing, building a company. Mayor Watson this morning talked about how great Ottawa is as a place to build a company, and I won't repeat the universities and the government and everything, but I do want to add to his comments, which is that Ottawa has a great small community that's incredibly supportive in its culture. And there's a whole bunch of people here, probably in this room and in the community, that are looking for help. They're in various stages. They're just starting up. They're trying to grow. They're whatever stage they're in. They're looking for some assistance. And then there's a whole group of people here that have already been through the School of Hard Knocks, have learned some stuff along the way, have some experience, and they're quite willing to share that knowledge. And it's organizations like TiE that bring those two groups of people together that really want to support each other. So thank you to TiE and happy birthday.
So the next recipient is Claude Hall. So what can I say about Claude? So earlier on in the conference, people referred to me as, I think it was our famous MC here, who referred to me as the Master Jedi. So if I'm the Master Jedi, Claude's Yoda. Right. So he said to keep it short, but I've got pages and pages of his bio here. So Claude is very, very inspirational. He's a great leader. His leadership style exemplifies quiet leadership. So when I look at what Claude does on a very quiet basis, He's a major change maker. He's a real catalyst in the community. He's done tons of stuff. He was the CEO of Oaktree at one time. When I first met Claude, he was actually a VC. And if you look at the name that he chose for his VC firm, it kind of speaks to his DNA. His 24th chromosome, if you like, was around mentorship and coaching. It was called Venture Coaches. So it was all about giving back to the community. It wasn't just about giving money, it was also about giving back to the community and helping those entrepreneurs who are coming through. You can read his bio online, it's great. I just wanted to say a few words. He's actually my mentor, and I'd like to invite you up, Claude. Thank you.
I won't take long. Coralie said it best. I don't think I can add very much. It's been my pleasure to be part of TiECon, and I've had fun working with most of the people in this room, so thank you very much.
So we're coming to the final recipient. So over the last couple of days, I've been sometime here standing at the podium and sometimes sitting in the audience. I heard a lot of accolades about all the work I've been doing and how this conference has been very valuable, bringing speakers from outside, learning, contributing to the community, fostering entrepreneurship. I guess it's important to realize what TiE is. TiE is, at the end of the day, it's a bunch of people coming together and deciding that they want to do something for the community that they live in. TiE, of course, is a global organization, but at the grassroots, it's individuals that come together and they contribute. And we, in the TiE family, we call them charter members. How do you define charter members? I've been doing that for a long time. I use this word. They're the backbone of our chapter, the backbone of our organization. These are the individuals who, most of them, who have done very well in their life, and they decided that they want to come back and give back. And there's thousands of entrepreneurs out there, thousands of people who have done well in their life, but very few will come out and say that, hey, I want to give back. So when TiE started, it was 3-4 of us started, and I remember that people saying that how long it's going to last, a week? And then some have said, oh no, a month, and some have said another Indian organization, and after 6 months they were saying a year. And the reason why TiE is around today and we're standing here today is because there were individuals who truly came and gave their time, their wisdom, and also their money. Everything that they could give, any possible way they can contribute to make sure that TiE is doing good. So with that, I'm going to introduce the next recipient, Dr. Deepak Roy. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Deepak as well, what his contributions, has it done, so when the organization was so small, it was like a small little family. Anytime you need something, you go to these individuals. I'll give you an example of it. How did this contribution comes in? It's not about that they can contribute, and that this is actually, it's very important. Let me take my words back. So when we did a first TiECon, Claude and I were the co-chairs, and we realized that our goal to do a TiECon in Ottawa is to get $100,000. And yes, we went out. Claude did an amazing job. He was chair of sponsorship. At the last minute, for several reasons, it turns out that we said we need $30,000 more. And my colleagues here from other chapters, they'll hear the story. It happens in other chapters as well. So a week before, I called Kalai. I said, Kalai, I'd like to organize a dinner. And at your house, I already imposed on him. So he said, definitely, opened his door. We quickly called all charter members. The purpose of this dinner was to let people know, all the charter members know, that how well TiECon is going, our first ever TiECon. But what it ended up doing was that asking for another $30,000, $40,000. and before we could end the dinner, we had the $40,000 in our hand. Clyde wrote the first check, Deepak was there. So it's been a giving. So you can see that Deepak's contribution, his contribution through TiE for 15 years, early days, making sure the organization survive, and then making sure it thrives. So he's been a mentor. He has invested in TiE companies or TiE members. We used to take a delegation to TiE Boston, and out of the 10 delegations, with me, he co-hosted those eight delegations. My friends from Boston would know that. And he's the only charter member who had represented TiE and the global events 4 times, even more than me. And of course, when the TiECon Canada started, the first thing that happens is the 4 components to doing a conference like this: money, good speakers, audience, and the logistics. So the money comes the first thing. And I have a sort of open commitment from Deepak. When we start TiECon, his check is the first one on there, to support entrepreneurship. With that, I would like to invite Deepak, a good friend and a true supporter of TiE and entrepreneurship in Ottawa.
So, thank you very much. I'm speechless, so I'm not going to bore you. Anyway, to be recognized by the hero of all heroes standing in front of you, and these are the people that have put together TiE for the last 5 years, and every year it keeps on getting better. So, all the awards and recognition and the accolades really belongs to these guys. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And with that, dinner is being served. Please remain seated. Maitre d' will come to your table and take you to the buffet. Thank you.